Hey, welcome back to West Coast Mopars. Today I am doing some maintenance on this 65 Fargo. There's an earlier video on the channel, but if you guys haven't seen it, this truck was my Papa's, my grandpa, we called him Papa. And he was gifted the truck in the mid 60s. It's a 65 Fargo, so he was gifted the truck. It wasn't that old, and I guess he was gifted it because he would go over and help the neighbor out with a bunch of stuff and on his house and whatnot. And when they moved, they gifted him this truck, and I imagine it was probably pretty clean and quite a nice truck when they gave it to him. So he had it for years and years, and I remember growing up riding around in it with him. My cousin remembers being in it, and they ran out of gas right in front of the Dairy Queen. Just everybody's got a memory in this thing. I remember it always parked in the yard, he'd use it, but I remember it was always where he would park it. We were kids, you just have memories of it. Everybody in the family has memories of it. Somebody came along, I guess, one day and asked him if he'd sell it, and he really didn't want to, but the guy kind of said he wanted to restore it, and he just loved it, he had to have it. And my Papa was just kind of one of those guys. He just went, yeah, all right, if you need it more than me, then I'll sell it. And he sold it for like nothing, like dirt cheap, a couple of $100 kind of thing. And this would have been in the 90s. And so, anyways, I always kept my eye out for it. And we'd go to car shows together, and he'd sort of point out different ones and go, oh, I wonder if that's my old truck. It sure looks like it. And so, anyways, long story short, I was driving through Qualicum, and I look over and I see this thing parked there, and it never had a rear bumper. I put this on here, but it never had a rear bumper on it, and so that was one of the things that would stand out that you kind of remembered looking for. Plus, it's a 65 Fargo. You just don't see these around here in this kind of condition. And so anyways, I stopped and asked about it, and turns out it is the same truck, and they agreed to sell it to me. And so here it is. So that's sort of the backstory on it. My wife and I, we've been driving it around. I picked it up last summer, and so I haven't had that much time to drive it. We drove it as much as we could till the weather turned. But basically, I haven't done really much maintenance. I got it home, and I was so excited, and I driving it around, and it runs great. It's got a few little issues and stuff, but it's I haven't even pulled the wheels off. I have no idea what kind of shape they're in. It's got four-wheel drum. I haven't looked at the bearings. I haven't looked at the rubber hoses. I haven't looked at, I haven't even really looked at the kingpins. It's a Canadian truck, so it's actually a 313 poly, but you guys know 318 polys. These are the A series engines. A lot of guys will call them a wide block. Some people call them a big block, but they are not a big block 318. That does not exist. All big blocks have a distributor up front. This one's at the back. This is an A series engine. So when you think of an LA, your 273, 318, 340, 360 LA engine, that is a light A. So it's a light A series engine. So you guys that calling these big blocks, stop calling it that. Not only are you incorrect, you just sound weird. It's not a big block. Anyways, somebody's put a dual master in it. It's got power steering, which swept lines don't really come with power steering. So that is it's a Toyota 4x4 power steering box out of like an early 80s Toyota. I can show you guys closer up down underneath, but yeah, it's got a little conversion kit on it. It bolts to the frame, and it uses the pitman arm from this truck. It's still got these hoses are ancient, and it's got these old hose clamps on it. It still has the heater control valve, which swept line guys know they rot. Even this one's getting a little bit scaly, but they rust out, and guys end up taking them out. But one of the things is it stopped charging the battery. And even before, when I got it home, it was charging at like 18 volts, full pegged, and that was that voltage limiter, or mechanical voltage regulator at the back, that little black box on the firewall. They are just a set of points that open and close, set of contacts. Sometimes they stick shut, and that puts 18 volts through, and sometimes they stay open and you got no charging. So I did change it. It worked for a few months, and I just fired it up the other day and it stopped working again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this to a 70 and up it's a dual field alternator with an electronic voltage regulator. So that should help with the charging issues. I've never had an issue with those electronic ones. I think the one in my 70 Dart, it's still in there after 30 years of me owning it, so, or 25 years of me owning it, so, yeah. I did order brake parts, because my thing with anything I seem to purchase, it always needs brakes, so I am going to go through the brake system. I just drained the oil earlier today. Desperately needs an oil change. The transmission fluid, who knows? So I'm going to drain that. I'm going to drop the pan. I'm going to adjust the bands and change the filter. The exhaust. I've got a little list here. The exhaust is, I'll show you guys in a second here. I'll put it up on the hoist. The exhaust is old and crusty, and somebody's already welded patches on it trying to save it, so I think it's time for a set of new mufflers. The fuel temp gauges, they do not work. The fuel gauge, unfortunately on these, the voltage limiter, it's not the plug-in style that goes on the back of the gauge cluster. It's the limiter is actually in the fuel gauge. It's got a big resistor in there, and then it sends power after it's gone through the resistor to the temp gauge. So neither of those work, and it's due to the fuel gauge. And it burned up when I was driving it, and then I found another gauge and I put it in, and it lasted about 2 weeks, and then it burned up. So I don't know if I've got some kind of other issue happening, but it just can't keep a fuel gauge going. So I may have to either have no fuel gauge, which I'm used to anyways, but a temp gauge would be kind of nice. Another thing is the seat. So I'm probably going to get my buddy there who did the dump truck seat to redo this one. So I'd love to keep the same sort of funky textured pattern, just to keep it looking original. I'm pretty sure this is the original bench seat for this truck. The seat back is in great shape, but unfortunately the bottom has just got these splits. So I'd love to get, all I've got right now is this little bolt here. I'd love to get the chains back on there. It's a 65, so it doesn't have reverse lights. This is an early 65. It's still got the 4 headlights on the front end. It's not the later 66. They went to the big pie eye grill. And then I recently, as in just the other day, put this bumper on. So my buddy has a 67 D100, and he built some gnarly 383 for it, and just does burnouts in it all day. And he took the bumper off to save weight on the back. So this actually originally had the big long sides that go up the quarter panel. They're outside still. I ended up cutting them off. I don't love the look of it unless it's on, like, say, a 4x4 or something. This truck's, to me, it just didn't suit it. So I did cut the sides off. The factory weld was right here. So it's like they took just a regular bumper and they just added it on. So I sliced it there, and then unfortunately I didn't notice any of these holes until I had actually painted it. And then by that point I sort of put it on and I went, oh well. I'm gonna put a light here for the license plate. I don't have collector plates on the truck yet. I just put that there to make sure the plate would fit. But yeah, and then it had this huge receiver right here that was just like gnarly stick welded on here by some farmer or Dave, maybe, I don't know. But I cut that off because it just looked ridiculous. But yeah, and then I had to go underneath here. I had to re-weld the brackets. So this part of the bracket was actually down here, sticking out. So I just cut it off. It's a little goofy looking. I stick welded it back on. Alright, looking at the brakes, the shoes look not bad. Lots of life left. They're a little cracked in some spots. I'm going to compare them to the new shoes. If the new shoes have a ton of meat compared to these, I'll change them. But if these are basically similar, I'll just put the new shoes up on the shelf for future. Interestingly enough, when I pop the hubcap, it's got studs instead of lug nuts. So the studs thread into the drum there, just like in the 50s. So I don't know. I'm guessing Canada just carried Canadian-made stuff. You know, Canada got all the sort of leftover stuff, and I'm guessing this this truck got sort of just leftover 50s drums. When I popped the wheel cylinder caps on the rear here, it's pretty dry. Looks good. But when I pop the front, it's pretty wet inside. I don't know if you can see that in there. Hard to see with this light shining straight up, but pretty wet in there. So I will change the wheel cylinders, which is good because these hoses are ancient. I'd hate to just leave them now that I've seen what they look like. So I'll get these wheel cylinders changed. The hardware looks to be in great shape. Everything else looks pretty good. The wheel bearing was a little dry, so I'll repack that. And I am going to just run one pass on these drums. They look really good, but there's quite a ridge here on the top that's catching, so it's just been a while since they've been turned. So I'll just run them like probably just one pass through the lathe, just to get rid of that ridge, so that when I put them back on here, they're not dragging along as they go to the edge there. New shoes are in. I decided to put the new ones in. This the leading shoe here is really thick. Alright, there's the drum turned. Like I said, just one pass. That was good enough. I don't want to turn too much off this drum. The actual outer surface is like the thickness left. There's not a lot when I'm really looking at it. I think this flange is deceiving. It makes you think there's a whole bunch there, but it goes in a little bit. So I just did one pass, clean up that edge, and there was some grooves and stuff in there, so that's good to do. I'm just gonna pack these wheel bearings. Now they're already Timkins, which is awesome. Made in Canada, good quality. I have bought cheapies in the past. Actually, I think that's probably what I put on this car when I did the disc conversion, and they lasted like maybe a year, and they're already squealing. So I've got to do those too. And this time I bought Timken. But good quality, made in Canada, really good roller bearings. So I'm just going to pack them here. Now I don't know how you guys pack your wheel bearings, but I got a big bucket of grease here. I just put some grease in my hand, and I just slap the bearing in my hand, and you can see that grease coming up through between the bearings there, the rollers. So you're just slapping the grease into the bearing. And if you run low on grease, grab some more. And just make your way around. This way you really get the grease up between the bearings and not just smearing it on the outside and calling that good, because that is not good. That will fail after, it won't take very long for that grease to spread around in the spindle and just disappear. So best way to pack your wheel bearings. And it's nice to have some gloves on. I've done this before without them, and side of the road somewhere where failed wheel, thinking, oh, I'll pack these, I'll just use my hand. Oh man, what a mess to clean up later. But that's a good way to get lots of grease coming out the other side. And the rears are the same story. Leaking wheel cylinders. Just pop the little piston out of the end there. You can see it sort of dripping out the end. The other side will be the same. But sure is nice to have brake lines that just come out like no problem. These tube nuts, they're still spinning freely on the brake lines. That's quite nice. These shoes though, these are quite thin. There's not much left on these and they're cracked. So good to do them like everything else. Story of my life, brakes, always brakes. Okay, and so here's looking under the truck. This seal on the front of the oil pan where it meets the timing cover is definitely leaking. So I did order a oil pan gasket, and I'll probably clean up the pan a bit here. I don't know if I'll respray it or just sort of peel off the peeling paint. That's that Toyota power steering box. And I didn't know it was Toyota until I literally saw Toyota on the end there. It's funny it's spelled with a D, but maybe it's the knockoff Toyota. Anyways, it's got this bracket here. You can see that black bracket. That bolts to the frame. And then it does follow through with the pitman arm. So I've seen some early Fords do the same thing. I guess somebody thought, try it on this. It does work. It works great. The steering radius is not as good as I would think it would be. But I don't know if that's just the truck with tall tires or if that's that steering box. Here's my mufflers. So these are really old. Somebody's changed like the tailpipes and the pipes coming in, but the mufflers themselves are pretty crusty. And this one's got a big patch welded on it and it's blown out underneath here. So rather than try and patch it again, I'm just going to change them. This is very obvious that they're due for a change. But look at the floors in this thing. Like, no rust anywhere. Original sheet metal, no patches welded in. This truck is incredibly solid. All along the bottoms of the doors, the little bit here on the corner, like this corner of the cab, I guess. Not the cab corner itself, but just underneath here. But the box is solid. Everything's really nice on this truck. So obviously my papa took care of it. And the people who got it from him, as far as I know, it didn't really get used. This is questionable why it's so gooped up over here and so dry over here. So it leads me to believe that the vent is plugged. Or maybe it's just oil coming out of the vent or something. Something's going on there. I'll have to look into that. This side's kind of wet versus this side's not. But yeah. And fender tag says I've got 355s, which is probably accurate. This is not a stamped 8 3/4, which I have seen before. It's got some numbers here underneath all this stuff, but not on the normal side. But yeah, there's the underside of the truck. Just a nice clean example of a 65 Fargo. Okay, parts came in the other day. Got brake hoses, wheel cylinders. I got a high beam for one of the high beams is dead. Springs for the brakes, hardware, just a bunch of stuff. And I've also got an oil pan gasket here because the one on here was just done and it's absolutely glued itself down to the pan. Now I've already cleaned up this side. It's taken some time with just a little brass wire brush and on the drill and just scraping this stuff off here. Now it looks like almost every single one is sort of beveled up, like the hole is kind of up a little bit, which means people have just been over tightening the pan. So what you do is flip it over and you can use a ball peen hammer and hammer on the other side here on a flat surface and just sort of bring it back to back down to flat. So, and then the actual bottom end, nothing weird going on, just normal. Everything looks pretty good. The oil pickup's got a weird, almost like a kink in it there. I don't know if that's normal. As far as I know, the Sweatline oil pickups for the the A-series engines, the poly. It's unique to the trucks, to the swept lines. So I'm not going to touch it. I don't want to do anything that's going to damage it, but just going to clean up down here, the bottom side of the engine where the cork's left over, and clean this up, and put the new gasket in the pan and get it back in. Okay, filters out. So this is the old thread-on canister style. You see these a lot in cars like this one, this 57 Dodge. It's got that. You don't see it, LA's, they don't use it, but this poly has it. So you just put your filter, this is the filter here. This goes inside that canister, and you get a gasket seals it to the block. So instead of threading it on like you guys are used to, this is what you use. Anyways, just cleaned out the inside, put the new filter in. Alright, I got the pan cleaned up a little bit. I just put it on my wood stove over there. I've got the wood stove going. So I just put it on there to heat it up, and then I took it outside and sprayed it with some red paint. It just had a bunch of grease on it. By the time I cleaned it off, half the paint came off. And cleaned out the inside, just some brake clean and rags, and new gasket. And it is fighting me a bit. These little nubs don't want to go through the holes in the pan there, but once I get it in place, it'll squish down. And cork gasket. And then you guys know, put some RTV in the corners where the cork meets the rubber. So now I'm just going to go through the process of, it was a struggle to get it out of there because that pickup's so close to the frame. So it'll be the same, and I'm sure that gasket is going to, it's going to move around and be a fight to get in place, but hopefully it goes smooth enough. Okay, and I've got the transmission pan off here. I just cleaned it up. Same thing, used some brake clean, cleaned it up, got a new gasket. There's a new filter to go in. What's interesting here, it says, just faintly read, somebody's written Parksville on the bottom here. That's the town near me here. They wrote Miles Auto, it looks like. So that Miles Auto is a shop in town. It's changed names over the years. Miles was Miles D, then it was Miles Auto. I'm not sure what it is now, but it's pretty interesting that, you know, the transmission pan has some history of going down to that shop locally in town here. And so I've got the pan off. I took the filter off. Valve body looks fine. Everything looks normal. There's nothing broken or flopping around in there. And this is a cable shifted 727. 65 I think was the last year for that. But I'm just going to adjust the bands while I've got the pan off. So one of the bands is here. This is the adjuster bolt, and that's the lock nut. So we'll go through that in a second. And then the other band is actually, so the one up on the side there, that is for low. The one up on the side there, that is for low and reverse. So low being first gear. And then this one here is for your second, third. So you just loosen off the lock nut, and then you tighten this little tiny bolt head. I use a 5/16, so I think it's a 12-point socket. Anyways, you just tighten this to 72 inch-pounds. So if you don't have inch-pounds like a torque wrench, you can just use your fingers, but just go like just a little tiny push on it is basically 72 inch-pounds. You don't want to crank it down. So I just marked the bottom with a Sharpie, and then you would turn it. So say like quarter, half, three-quarter, that's one turn, quarter, half, three-quarter, two, quarter, half, and it would end up being pointing up. It's just an easy way to sort of see how far you've gone. And then you just tighten down the lock nut again, and that's it. That's all you have to do. But often, when you tighten them down, they'll tighten down like 3 or 4 turns. So you know it was way, way out, really loose. So it's just good to do while you've got the pan off. It's something that people think, oh, adjusting the bands is really complicated and I'll get someone else to do it, but it's really quite simple. Anybody can do it. Okay, so I just backed off the adjuster nut here. You can see it spinning here. That's loose. And then I've got my I've got my inch-pound torque wrench here set to 72, and then you just tighten it down. So there it is. That's clicking at 72. So now we're going to back it out 2.5 turns. And you can see there on the bottom I've marked it with a Sharpie. And then take a 5/16 wrench, and it's just 2.5 turns out. So there's a quarter, half, 3/4. There's 1 turn because we just matched it. Quarter, half, 3/4. There's 2, and there's a half. So 2.5 turns, and then you use your 5/16 on the end, and you just tighten down this lock nut again. And I think there's a certain torque spec for it. It's in the shop manual, but I usually just go till it's tight. Nice and tight. That's not going to move. And that's all you do. That's it. This second, third band is adjusted. It's very simple. It's pretty hard to screw it up. I like to use the actual little inch-pound torque wrench or whatever to make sure that I've got that proper. But if you don't have one, again, you kind of just go till it's like finger tight. You can't go any tighter. You don't want to crank down on it. You don't want to crank down and then turn out that you're actually only 2 turns out because you went so tight. Alright, brakes are all bled on the Fargo, and I greased everything under here. I could see new brake hose here. It's sort of a little close to the tailpipe, maybe an inch away, should be okay. The old one was real pain to get out. These ones, same thing, they have a nut that threads on over the end of the hose, so there's no little clip on these ones. But at least all the brake lines came apart nice and easy, aside from that one hose. And now I'm on to the mufflers. So actually the one in town, the place in town did have these thrush mufflers, these old glass packs. Man, I never thought I would be putting glass packs in something. Years ago in my 70 Dart, I was probably 18. That was the last time I put glass packs in anything. I've taken them out of a lot of vehicles. However, the ones in this truck are a glass pack. So I'm just going to replace these with basically what's in here. They sound fine to me. They're not super loud. They're not super drony. So I'll just put these back in. They were, I think they were 40 bucks each. So 80 bucks Canadian. And they had them in stock. So yeah, I'll get these clamps off. These are the exact same length. So that works out really well. Get these clamps off, and hopefully don't have to cut any pipe. And actually it looks like someone did weld it here, so I'll have to figure that out. Alright, I've got the one muffler out here. So what I normally do is, well here, I'll show you on the old muffler. I normally cut with a Sawzall. So say like the end of the muffler actually came to here, the extension. I'll cut it back here, and then that extra chunk is still on the pipes on the truck, and then I'll just use a grinder and zip along like sideways, and then I can just peel it off. This one they had welded, they had run like a weld on each side. I'm not sure why, but and clamped it, so they had done both. But these ones are out, or at least that one is. Still got to get this guy out. But now I'll just slide this glass pack over each end, and I've got these stands here. I can get the height perfect now. I never used to have these stands, so these are kind of handy. Okay, both mufflers are in. Both are welded in. I did have to patch the pipe a little bit where I cut the old weld off. Both sides there. But yeah, those are in. We'll see how they sound in a bit here. Now something else I did notice, I probably should address it while it's winter here, I'm not driving the truck, is it sits very crooked. So I don't know how well you can see that from back here. If I stand back here, if you look at the hoist is level. Now the driver's side is actually sloped way down. The passenger side is up. And for a while I was trying to figure out what was going on there. And so I know this hoist is level. I put the hoist in, it's fine. So if I took a tape measure and say I sort of eyeballed it from, I don't know, let's go from the fender here, or where the fender meets. It's 8 inches to the top of that plate. If I come over here, it's 6.5. So we're 1.5 inches down on the driver's side. And so what I think I'm going to do is I've got a bunch of old leaf springs outside from parts cars and stuff. I'm thinking I will just take these 2 shackles off. It should be pretty easy because it's not like anything's going to fall. It's not like where the other way where you have the leaf springs underneath the axle. Here they're on top. So I think what I'm going to do is just loosen those 2 shackles, or take them right out. And because there's still, a good 1/2 inch of meat, there's threads on those, I can add a leaf spring and still have enough threads to put those shackles back in. And I think what I'll do is I'll add probably like one a little longer than this third one here, third one from the top. That way it's not super stiff. If I add a really short one, it'll be really stiff. If I add a longer one, it'll still have some softness when you drive. So I'm thinking add one a little longer than this one, probably come out to about here. And that should help with the ride height. I'm not going to do it on this side because I don't want it to have the same problem. You do both sides and it'll still be crooked because these ones are just a little more worn out. So I'll try that. I'll try just the driver's side and we'll see if it straightens it out a little. So the U-bolts are here, and I'll just have to clean them up before I put them in. But 2 of them one in the front, one in the back, and then here's the shock plate. That came out pretty easy. And now I've just got to cut these off. Unfortunately, there's no way to save these. They just get pressed by the factory up top here. So I've got these leaf springs separated a little bit. I had to cut the center bolt. That was sort of, I don't know if you can see it there. There's a bolt there. It was a pin. Goes through, and it just sort of keeps them center. But once you put the shackles back on, or the U-bolts, put the U-bolts back on, and then these shackles, they're not going to go anywhere. So I've got them sort of separated. I've got a kind of a sketchy jack setup going on here on the end. I've just got a floor jack on a piece of angle iron and just sort of resting on the edge here. It's just a jack up the front of the truck. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. It's fairly sturdy, but it looks sketchy. And then on the back, I've just got a bottle jack up to the frame. So I just got to get it a little higher so that I could get this leaf spring in here. So this one here is the one I'm going to use. It seems to be the good length. Here's that leaf pack. I just cut the center bolt out and they sort of sprung apart. And I took a wire brush and I just sort of cleaned up all the surface rust and junk that was in between the leaf pack. And then it's got these little rubber pads that are, these ones are still on it, see here? These rubber pads on the ends. I just cut those off. The pack in the truck doesn't have them, so I'm not going to add those. But I just got to go a little higher so I can then get this arch to go in there, because it's quite an arch there, and these are flattened out a bit. Okay, so it's in. This is it here. This one. So I cut the ends off. It was so arched I couldn't get it in, but I just realized I cut them a little too short, and they basically, it's the exact same length as the one below it. See, here it is on the other end. I don't know how well you can see that with the light shining through, but yeah, so oh well, we'll put it down, we'll see what it looks like, and yeah, so the leaf spring is in. I've taken the weight off. I've let the weight back down, sorry. I've got the jacks out of there, and I haven't put the U-bolts in yet, or those little shackles, but it's looking better already. So from this side of things, if I take my tape measure, well, you can already see, right, when you look straight at it, it's not sagging anymore to the driver's side. It's actually sitting quite level. So if I take my tape measure now, from the bumper, and I just kind of eyeball it on the top of that plate there, I'm 8 inches. Now if I come to the driver's side, bumper, I'm 7 7/8. So that is pretty good to me. We were 6.5 before, so we just gained 1.5 inches just by adding a leaf, and that only took, like, realistically, it probably took an hour. So it's really not a big deal. To me, that's way quicker and cheaper and easier than taking those leaves completely out into the spring shop, getting them to re-arch them or build me a new set. The last time I got leaf springs made was probably 20 years ago for my Dart, and at that time I think they were like $500. So I can only imagine now it's probably $1,000 just to get a set of leaf springs made. And all I wanted to do was just level it out. So adding a leaf spring, that took no time at all. We'll see how long it lasts. Maybe that one is clapped out too, and you know, next year I'll notice the truck sagging again, and then maybe we'll go from there. But at least for now, that's a good quick fix and something you guys can do on a budget. So shackle, or the U-bolts are back in, and the shock plate, it's all bolted up. So there's sort of the finished product aside from these. So these guys are what I was talking about. These are, I've already modified these ones. And so they're a little tall. I'll have to add some spacers, but just have to build a little bracket goes across. So just a little plate, drill a couple holes in it, and some nuts. And all that does is stops these leaf springs from moving side to side. You know, you just don't want them to sort of swing around. They won't really with those U-bolts on there, but it's just another extra thing to keep them from moving around. Alright, so that front end is back together, and as you can see, or I can see, it is way better. And I'm just doing putting the oil in now. I'm actually using Shell Rotella, but I just put it in this jug I've got, this old Hot Rod Classic 2050. This stuff's expensive. The Rotella is way cheaper than that stuff, so that's what's going in here. And I've just removed the alternator here, and it's got the original voltage regulator there. I think I mentioned that earlier. So I'm going to convert it. So here's the alternator. I think what happened is the alternator probably died. However, like this one has 2 pulleys, which if you guys have ever changed these out, the singles line up perfect in there. The doubles, they don't line up quite as well unless you got the right pulley on the water pump. So the belt ends up on a big angle and stuff. But this is an original alternator. You can see it's got that forward look emblem there. So, and it's a single field. But what I'm going to put in is I've got a dual field alternator, and I've got I think it's in here. I picked up another voltage regulator, but this is this is an electronic one. So this is 1970 and up. Chrysler started using these electronic regulators, and I have never really had a problem with these. These just work. So what you do though, and I've got a wiring diagram online that I found online for it, I've done it a couple times now, is you have to add a field wire. Because right now you've got ignition and a field wire on that old mechanical style, and then you've only got one field wire here, right? This is your charge wire, and then you've got one field wire. So you basically just add a field wire, and then as far as I remember, those two actually get spliced together. And that's one side of it, and then the field wire you add is the other side, being those 2 pins there. I've got the one spliced, and this is a piece of heat shrink right here that I'll put over that butt splice. And then on this end, I need another end like this one. So I've got I got a parts cart in the back that's packed full of harnesses that I've saved over the years from parting out other Mopars, and should be able to find something back there. Because you don't want to just use any old female butt splice or female connector, and you still want it to look factory. So in the back of this 70 New Yorker, I do have a bunch of wiring here. This is all, there's some Ford stuff in there too, but should be able to find what we need in here. There, got this one out of that trunk. So yeah, then at least when you're looking at the truck, you know, you pop the hood, it doesn't look like I've done something weird. And there it is completed. So I've got the harness plugged in, I've got the added field wire, which is this green one. I'll just tuck this down here. I did tape it all the way. Well, good news and bad news. The mufflers sound pretty good. Bad news is I left it overnight. It's actually been parked here a couple days now. I sort of turned my focus on this thing to the left here. But it puked all the tranny fluid out. So either the pan gasket is not, the pan's not tight, or it's leaking somewhere there. Now the old gasket was so, it was like glued to the pan, and it, you know, not with that actual glue, but it was just so old. I don't know if it had ever been changed. So unfortunately, something let go. It's just, I threw some cardboard under there to try and soak it up, but it just dumped it all out. So I'm not sure if it was maybe the O-ring on the dipstick on the tube. Alright, I just put transmission fluid back in. I had to seal up the pan really well. The pan was actually bent at the back. I didn't bend it. I don't know how it was even sealing before. Maybe somebody had gooped it up. And I mean, that cork gasket I stripped out of there was like rock hard. It was ancient. So who knows how it was sealing. But this is it. Now we're idling. I just waiting for that trans pump to pump all the fluid through. But underneath, we got no leaks as far as I can tell. I mean, you can see other crap under here, but that's from when it... Man, this whole area, this whole floor was just trans fluid, so it obviously just let the whole thing go. I think it's doing okay now. Yeah, but this is with those glass backs on there that we put on. And yeah, they sound like glass backs, but it's pretty similar to how it sounded before. Just as long as it's not too loud when I'm going down the road. If it is, I'll just change them out. But alright guys, well, I'm just going to call it here. So what we did was adjusted the bands, we did an oil change, we went over the front suspension, added a leaf spring, and much happier with the ride height. The mufflers I'm still unsure on. I might just order another set. You know, you get some cheap stuff. They're not that bad. The glass packs I'm torn on. I might just pull them out of there. I don't know. I've been starting it and moving it a couple times. I don't know if I love the sound. Anyhow, so next my buddy Chris, he's the guy who did the dump truck seat for me. He's going to do the bench seat in this truck for me. So I'll do another video on the bench seat and probably the tailgate chains. So thanks for watching, guys. We will see you shortly on the next one.